My pleasure to welcome back to the show, representing District 36B in the Minnesota House, Representative Melissa Hortman is also the Speaker of the Minnesota House. She's taken some time as our Democrat of the day. Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I appreciate the time again.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. I want to say, first of all, congratulations and thank you, because as a resident of the state of Minnesota, no politician anticipated this pandemic. I think for the most part, the politicians have done a good job. At least they did a good job, really, up to about midsummer or so. Everyone together. The DFL has been leading the way. They've done the DFL, I think, has been the common sense in this entire equation. And I appreciate your leadership through this entire year, because this has been an insane year.
It really has. I think you're right that there was really good collaboration in the beginning, but then it's been the DFL delivering common sense more recently.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to, if you don't mind sharing your thoughts, your management, really, of the legislature as the Speaker of the House. When this problem, came about, the last time we dealt with anything like this was 100 years ago, anything on this scale. So I would kind of love to hear how you felt your job needed to evolve or revisit something in the history. How did you approach the pandemic from a management position in the House?
Well, when I saw what was happening over in Italy, I started reading up on the 1918 flu epidemic, and I started really thinking about my responsibility as a leader if we saw the virus hit our shores. And here in the Midwest, we got a little bit of lead time, right, because we got to watch what was happening in New York City unfolding before it got to us. So for me, as the leader of the House, my first and foremost responsibility to the members and the staff, and almost more so to the staff, was to keep them safe. Because members are a pretty mouthy lot, we're pretty opinionated. We make our views known, but I think the staff sometimes are very deferential to the elected leaders, and so I felt the most important thing for me to do was have it be a safe workplace, but at the same time to understand we had a lot of very important work to do for the people of Minnesota, so to, as rapidly as possible, transition from doing things in a way that involved a lot of in-person interaction to switching to interactions that were safe so we could keep doing our job but not get anybody sick while doing it.
Well, which then has got to be infuriating. And without trying to get into anything personal with any specific politician, but to see Republicans that are still out there challenging a face mask rule when, as we go through this, as the state is going in through another wave of this crisis, it must be, as the leadership, it's like, okay, is this really going to be preschool again? Do I really have to deal with the kid eating paste again? Put the mask on. It must be infuriating to have to go back to such basics when having to deal with what is supposed to be a group of grown adults here.
Well, that's right. And I think when you look at the stories of what has happened to individuals who've gotten COVID-19, it's across the spectrum. Mm-hmm. We had an Ironman competitor laid low by this disease. We had a 30-something-year-old mother lose her life to this disease. And I think for some people it's tempting to say, hey, I'm strong, I'm healthy, it's not going to be a problem if I get it. And to get those folks to internalize that might be true, it might not be true, but could you please be more considerate of everybody else who might not be as tough and strong and as healthy as you?
It was frustrating. Well, and of course the super spreader events continue in Minnesota with Pence up in Hibbing today. So it comes from the top down. If you don't respect the fact that we got a pandemic going on, you're not going to treat it with the respect that you need to treat it with, and that's been unfortunate. We've also had a session play out here under unique circumstances, with the governor extending his emergency powers, having to give the House and Senate the ability to veto said ruling. The House and the Senate never, of course, agreed to, veto it, but it did present a situation where the session, for lack of a better way to say it, just got stretched out, albeit for a few days each month, but got stretched out from its normal timeline all the way to finally passing the bonding bill last session.
Right. Well, it's been interesting having once-a-month meetings of the legislature, but it's good that we did this year because we had a very unreasonable position that the House Republicans took back in May. They sort of painted themselves into a corner. They They couldn't get out of that corner in June. They couldn't get out of that corner in July. And then in August and September, it was off limits for us to be passing a bonding bill. Whenever the state sells bonds, we have to have a quiet period where we don't change the financial standing of the state. And so August and September were just simply unavailable to us. So the next time we got to try the bill after July was October. And I'm grateful to Senator Gazelka for actually being willing to stay in St. Paul for 3 days so that we could wait out the really unreasonable objections of the House GOP and get that bill passed.
And it should be mentioned, and this is, by the way, one of the reasons why I personally am not a big fan of the GOP, is because we knew they were going to pass this bill. They had to, just for politics reasons, because if they went back to their districts to try to win an election without doing so, they would have really seen massive losses. So we knew they were going to do it. We knew all this bravado that they were putting out there was just fake. And yet here we get to this point, and once again, they did play the dog and pony show in the House, where all of a sudden, the pipeline was up. We had to approve the pipeline if we were going to do this, and even though they kind of Kurt Doubt and the Republican leadership rescinded their demand on the governor handing over his emergency powers, they still did come with a laundry list of stuff that they were trying to get jammed through with that bonding bill.
Well, I'm glad that you knew that it was going to happen, because I sure didn't. I had not 1 minute of peace until we got to the vote that we needed. But during the floor debate, there were antics. There were all these votes that were forced on completely unrelated issues. And it would be nice if we could get away from that garbage on the House floor, because it takes up a lot of time and energy, and it masks our true disagreements. We should really be clear with the voters about the areas where we disagree and not create kind of these fake issues that are easy to beat up the other party. It's one thing to call your opponent extreme and then beat up that extreme position when it's not true than it is to say, look, this person has a different perspective of how we get this particular problem solved. Think of how much more problem solving we could get done if Republicans weren't creating these false caricatures of what a Democrat is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I do not mean to dismiss or downplay the stress you or Representative Winkler went through in getting this bonding bill passed. My feeling on it was going to get passed was it would be political suicide for them to not pass something with the bonding bill. And especially because one of the things I loved about the bonding bill was this was one of those bonding bills where you saw real benefit to Minnesotans, water treatment plants, new roads, things getting done, for goodness sakes, that we need to get done. We keep screaming about needing to upgrade our infrastructure. This bonding bill did it. And so at the end of the day, I mean, you're right. They could have been stubborn. But the reality is I kind of looked at it in the perception if they're not willing to go forward at this point, then, they really are on a decision to try to lose as many seats as possible. And I just didn't think that was going to happen.
Well, I think that this is where the point about creating a fake issue comes into play. So fiscal conservatives have created this litmus test on the bonding bill that if you're a true fiscal conservative, you don't vote for the bonding bill. And we both know that's ridiculous, right? That's like saying if you're a fiscally conservative homeowner, you will never have a home loan and pay a mortgage every month and pay off your house and then own your house. We know that having a capital asset, improving a capital asset, and having the value appreciate over time is a good economic decision, no matter whether you're fiscally conservative or fiscally liberal. So to make the vote on the bonding bill into the referendum on whether you're a true fiscal conservative or not is just poppycock, right? It makes no sense. But it became this fake political issue where Republicans could differentiate themselves from one another on an issue where it's not actually about whether you're a fiscal conservative or not.
Because of the stances that the Republicans have taken, although no one's won anything until the votes are counted. But it is right now the signals with the early voting especially. Not only is the House looking like it will, there's a good chance it might stay in DFL hands. We've talked to a lot of House reps out there, and they're feeling like it's a very energized DFL base this year, which is a good thing. The Senate also looks like it's in play. Talk about, from your perspective, how frustrating it's been to pass bill after bill after bill and watch them get stalled in the Senate or completely ignored by the Republican Senate.
Well, first, getting to the point of the election and what could and couldn't happen in the election, we have all seen a race, whether it's a track event or a bike race, where the second place finisher soars past the person who's in first place at the end of the race, because the person who's in the lead, the apparent lead, looks forward and doesn't look back and doesn't see their competitor coming, and then their competitor comes and passes them by. And I think Democrats have to be very, very concerned about being the lead runner right now. Being out in front from a polling standpoint and an early vote standpoint doesn't mean that that political party that's in second place isn't pedaling faster than ever before or running faster than ever before, and they're not going to overtake us in the home stretch. So we have to run through the tape. We can look at those early vote numbers. We can look at the polling data and feel hopeful, but we have to find absolutely every human being who's at all inclined to vote our way and make sure, whether it's your brother, your sister, my poor children, until those ballots are in, getting calls from their mother about once every 2 hours of have you voted, have you voted, have you voted. But we have to absolutely run through the tape. A couple reasons. One, we can't take it for granted. And two, it has to be a blowout. It has to be absolutely, without argument, that the Democratic candidate for president has won this election fair and square and soundly. So to the second point, what can we do if we hold the House and we flip the Senate? So much. So many things are possible that aren't possible right now. Sensible legislation on gun violence prevention, actually taking the climate crisis seriously and taking climate action, an array of options looking towards the future. If we have a budget deficit, should we be contracting the economy or growing the economy? Growing the economy is on the table if Democrats win. So there's really a lot. And another thing that would be great is to do more construction. As you were talking about the bonding bill, we met only maybe about 1/5 or 1/3 of the need. There's a lot more building to do if we win good-sized majorities in the House and Senate.
And by the way, I have talked a lot to outstate DFLers, Democrats. I have been out in outstate Minnesota quite a bit this fall. I can tell you right now, broadband, make sure that broadband is part of this, because that is clearly, especially with this pandemic, whether it's medical uses, education uses, that the need for that broadband now is more pressing than ever statewide. And that is something that if the DFL could get that done, by God, that would be a true blessing and a massive investment in Minnesota itself.
Right. It has the double benefit of creating jobs and also making people's lives better, from telehealth to education to being able to work anywhere in the state.
I agree with you. I keep looking at these early numbers and I feel hope, but at the same time, I also see that I'm anticipating every person that voted Republican in 2016 is going to vote Republican again. So you're exactly right. We got to treat these races like we're behind and make sure everyone does vote. I want to drive people, Representatives, Madam Speaker, you have been brilliant. I have talked to you. You are one of the politicians I've talked to about 10 years now. And I have just been honored to watch your career. You are truly a leader we need right now. I'm so glad you're in charge of the Minnesota House. I want to keep you there. First of all, to drive people to your website, because you are running 36B. That's Brooklyn Park in Coon Rapids, right?
That's exactly right.
So if you want to make
sure.
So
my website... Yeah, my website is melissahortman.com, very simple, and I do need to win, and we also need to make sure that everybody who hasn't used their refundable $50, make sure to use that refundable $50 before the year is out. I am definitely communicating with the voters in my district and would appreciate any help and support at melissahortman.com.
I know you've been representing 36B very solidly, as well as the state of Minnesota as the speaker, so that's very good there. But as well, I'm going to go back to what you said earlier. Don't take anything for granted. Everyone needs to vote. Everyone needs to call everyone they know, correct?
Exactly, especially our friends and family. We need to be that annoying person who won't quit talking about voting, because then the only way for our brothers and sisters and friends and children to get us off their backs is to actually go vote.
My wife has gone door to door in our neighborhood, and she's actually convinced like 6 people to vote that have not voted before. So, it's hard. It's a little awkward, but you got to make that conversation happen.
It's so important. Think about the feeling of satisfaction in those close races. The John Purcell race in 2018, winning by 11 votes.
Yep.
Every single person who worked on that race can say he won because I worked on that race and I talked to people.
Absolutely, and that's Purcell. And Purcell, gosh, he makes that house better too. That's for sure. I like Purcell in there. Madam Speaker, all my best. I imagine we'll probably have another session coming up here. Are you anticipating anything major now that the bonding bill's done for these last few months? If the special session is called in, or is it pretty much just going to be a quick vote and done?
Right. I don't anticipate anything major in terms of legislation until the end of the year. I would anticipate that for all the retirements that we'll have another round of retirement speeches, most likely in December. Okay. And so that could be kind of a nice way to finish out the year and the special sessions related to the emergency powers.
I'll make sure when that does happen, we'll make sure we promote it here and let people know where they can go watch those speeches. Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Melissa Hortman is representative from 36B. She's also the Speaker of the Minnesota House and Democrat of the Day. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show right here on AM 950.